an India economic strategy. This India economic strategy was an example, a very unique example of positive unilateralism. So this isn't the US going into Iran sanctions type of unilateralism. This is Australia clear-eyed saying, even on a do-nothing scenario, if India doesn't change its tariffs at all, where are the opportunities for Australia and India to engage on trade and investment? What are the top 10 sectors? What are the top 10 states? And I think para-diplomacy will be after us, so it'll be interesting to think about the role of states and the leadership of states like Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat and others. But the India economic strategy had a real diplomatic head-turning effect, because while Australia is really captivated by India, Australia is relatively small for India. And yet, by the end of the year, we'll see the Indian government having invested in an Australian economic strategy. And for me, this demonstrates soft diplomacy at its best. It's something that, through Australia's positive unilateralism, we've actually been able to attract the same in kind, and we've done it away from rules, from dispute settlement, from a traditional trade model, and we've really used soft diplomacy to achieve this positive trade and investment look towards one another. But let's be fair to India. What does India do for itself? And I think we've seen Prime Minister Modi since 2014 launch International Yoga Day through the United Nations. This is a huge contribution to India's soft diplomacy. The Howdy Modi Texas Houston event was referred to, and again, this is about mobilising the diaspora and beginning to understand the real power, not just in remittances and economic power, but really the cultural and political power that can be wielded through diaspora. The International Solar Alliance one I find fascinating. So again, this was in partnership with France, but this is again the current government taking a leadership on renewable energy and on climate change. This is the first time that a developing country has stood up and really broken that north-south divide that usually colours multilateralism on these issues and said, okay, what can we in the developing country space do in the climate change space? It's the first international organisation to be housed in India, and it's really quite an ambitious undertaking. In breaking the north-south divide, it's also cleverly designed to attract investment for the green economy into developing and least developed countries, pooling a whole group together of Pacific Island countries, of countries that belong to the Tropic of Capricorn, to the Tropic of Cancer, and then others as well that can play a strong role outside of that belt increasingly. But I think it's one to watch and one where India truly is playing a leadership role. On the 2nd of October, you would have seen that for the Gandhi Jayanti celebrations, Modi did his from Ahmedabad, celebrating 5 years of Swachh Bharat, talking about the banning of single-use plastics, which he hopes to be zero by 2022, talking about a commitment on solar energy, which is currently 100 gigawatts which is a huge amount. I don't know much about gigawatts, but I know that's huge. And they're going to aim for 450 gigawatts by 2030. But interestingly, the Solar Alliance was done not just as a commitment to technology and innovation, but when it was launched, former Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj in Sanskrit used the five names of the sun god and talked about the role of the sun, not just as a renewable resource, but as a cultural aspect that has been with India for thousands of years. Almost did an arty-like thing during the launch of the International Solar Alliance. So again, that's using a major global challenge to which India is contributing, but also bringing in cultural and religious values as well. The other way in which I think India is wielding soft diplomacy is through arriving truly as a developed country by supporting other developing countries, and particularly targeting Eastern Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Primarily Africa, I would say, in terms of development, but looking at these others for export markets and also to become an education hub in its own right, drawing on students from these areas. So I guess thinking about soft diplomacy more concretely for India, what does it want to be known for if it were going to take further steps in the soft diplomacy space? When we think about the founding of India for independence, and I think this is a very relevant place to start, given Prime Minister Modi is focused on 2022 as the 75th anniversary of independence and also the year it will be hosting the G20. The way in which independence was founded, it was founded on secularism, that people of the Baha'i faith, Jains, Buddhists, Parsis, Sikhs, Muslims, Christians and Hindus can live together peacefully and all be welcomed and respected in this country, which is really a beautiful sentiment. It's the largest democracy in the world and proud. Its democratic decisions should be celebrated, particularly when it first set up its own independent democracy. I believe it's the first country to have offered the vote to both men and women, something even Australia and many countries didn't do. It's also a first mover in the use of technology and democracy with the use of electronic voting machines. So, you know, India is really a leader in the democracy space and can perhaps celebrate these things more. Environmental diplomacy we've mentioned, and of course, innovation. India is really a startup hub in the world and is becoming known for it. Its leadership in space and space technology, you know, the launch of the Mars orbiter a few years ago, these things are certainly ways in which India can make its mark. And at the beginning, Nandu also spoke about medical tourism, but pharmaceuticals and medical devices India is known for as well. If you add to that its traditional focus on yoga, Unani, homeopathy, the Ayush sector, perhaps combined with research, putting clinical evidence behind these traditional medicines could also be a huge game changer for preventative health and better well-being across the world. So I see lots of opportunities to harness India's soft diplomacy and to work with India, both in the government diplomatic space and with India's soft power assets.
Thank you, Tanya. May I ask Tom to quickly,
of course, yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Add on, yeah.
So, as I said when I was introducing myself, the British Council thinks of itself as a cultural relations organisation, not explicitly a soft power organisation. I think we have focused very heavily, understandably, given the title of the discussion, on soft power. But I want to kind of frame and set out that there's a spectrum of international relations. And on the one extreme, we have hard power, which has been talked about. And at the other end, there is aid. And there is a lot of space in between. And much of that has been defined as soft power. And the way we've talked about it here, and I think each person has gone back to definitions and back to Joseph Nye's definitions, which focus in on the getting what you want bit. So there's a very kind of instrumental aspect to soft power. You know, the influence and attraction bit, it means in that space between hard power and aid, there is subsections. So you've got projection and promotion. You have exchange, and then you have setting opportunities, creating opportunities for people. And it's really important to state that soft power is a contested space. Mm-hmm. We've heard all the areas of what I would call niche diplomacy that are being claimed and have been claimed in recent times. So it is a space that people want to be a part of. Now, the British Council isn't alone in declaring itself a cultural relations organisation. We have other partners, the Germans with the Goethe Institute, the French with the Alliance Française, for example, who similarly define themselves as cultural relations organisations. And that's because their focus is much more on the intrinsic value of cultural exchange, what it gives to people. And people is a really critical word here, because lots of soft power occupies a space of government to government, but cultural relations focuses in on people to people.